speaker. Alistair, we know you very well. Freelance, passionate about Earth observations and ecology. Partly you're going to present to us something really fascinating, a great project around interoperability and open data, isn't it? Go for it.
Mic check. Yeah. Yes, thank you for that. So, those of you who are eagle-eyed will see that I've changed my talk, actually, so sorry. I'm actually talking a little bit about some of the interactions I've had with Overture data over the summer, and it hopefully will link up nicely with what Matt Travis is talking about later on. So, yeah, a little bit about me. As Pascal said, he's right. I'm mainly an Earth observation person. I generally steer clear of polygons and lines and points as much as possible. Give me some pixels and I'm happy. I'm currently working as a freelancer, and so what I'm about to talk about relates to some work that I did for about 3 months over the summer. I'm also, this is a quick plug, I'm also a co-host on the GeoMob podcast. So going back to what was mentioned earlier, we are always looking for people to come and talk on the podcast. If you're interested, I'm the sort of EO person. So if you do EO stuff, come and talk to me. If you want one of the other co-hosts to talk to you about vector stuff that you're working on, also come and see me in the coffee break. I'm also on the OSGeo UK committee. And again, highly recommend you get involved with OSGeo UK and all of the stuff it does, including things like this event. And I am forever an optimist about free software and open data. So, but with that in mind, this talk, as I said, has changed a little bit. It was originally going to be a presentation where I was going to try and configure a geo application that I had in mind by basically asking all of you for like the hive mind to tell me what to do. I still think there's something in that talk, and I'll come back to that one day and do that again. However, over the summer, I started using Overture data, and it was a bit of an accident. I was using the data sets that I always use, my go-tos as I call them, and I just wasn't getting where I needed to get in terms of the quality of the data or the coverage of the data. And I remembered something that Matt mentioned at this event last year, which was very early days for Overture data. And as I started using it, I realized that it works really, really well. And it's super easy for people, for someone who doesn't even consider themselves a sort of points, lines, and polygons person to start using it. So I just wanted to try and promote the Overture project a little bit with you in case you haven't come across it. And highlight some of the differences with the data sets that I was using on projects before. So it's a bit of a show and tell. So, like I say, Matt is talking later on about Overture, and I'm sure he'll go into a bit more detail about this. But effectively, it's trying to create reliable, easy to use, and interoperable open map data. So you can think of it as OpenStreetMap with bells and whistles. And it's supported by a whole range of different organizations. So the main ones are AWS, Meta, Microsoft, and TomTom. But you can see that there's a whole range of other organizations involved, some of which are in the room today. So SparkGeo and Address Cloud and others as well. So in terms of this project I was working on, I was working with a small renewable energy company, and they had no geospatial background. And I was trying to help them understand where different buildings were. That was the main piece of work that I was doing. But what they also wanted to know was how close were those buildings to various different roads and paths and access points. And also, if they wanted to develop any projects that were coming to them on the energy side, what sort of land was there in the area they were looking at? Now, we were initially for this project just looking at an area around Blackpool and some of the sort of surrounding countryside around that. But ultimately, this needs to scale out to the whole of the UK. And what they want to do eventually is try and scale it out to the whole of Europe. So we need to keep that sort of thought process in our minds as well as we're looking at the data. So if I talk about land cover first, because it's the thing I tend to play around with most, I'm going to just talk about a local area where so we've got Nailsea here, which is just south of Bristol. This is Bristol. You're about here at the moment, just off the map. We've got Clevedon, we've got Portishead, and then there's a whole raft of countryside in between those different settlements. So that's a sort of test area rather than showing you information about it. So my main go-to, if I was looking for land cover, would be a European data set called Careen. And this comes in, you can get it in raster data sets, but you can also get it in vector as well. And it includes 44 thematic classes, but it mixes up land cover and land use as well. It's a bit of a shame, but it's only updated every 6 years. So the most recent that we have is 2018. It's due another update soon. But it has this thing called a minimum mapping unit of 25 hectares. And if you're not a specialist in land cover, even though it looks a bit sort of clunky here, it tends to be very good at defining areas that most people accept as a type of land cover or a unit of land cover. So for instance, red here is urban for the sake of this. This is Nailsea, this is Clevedon, this is Portishead. And if we flick back, you can see, if you just wanted to say, where is Nailsea? That would be a pretty good outline. Where is Portishead? That's a pretty good outline. So it's a useful data set in terms of being able to very quickly define different areas. In terms of sort of the UK best data set, we're probably going to be looking at something called the land cover map, and the latest version of that comes from 2023. So that has 21 thematic classes, so you can instantly see there's a difference between the 44 that we've had across Europe with the 21 we've already got. They've generated 11 maps since 1990, but that's not always at a sort of regular interval. There's been different intervals throughout that period. And the most recent update is this one from 2023. Now, unfortunately, I was using their WMS, because that's the way you can get open access to this. And so the colours don't match up, which is a shame. But effectively on this map, grey is the area of the urban areas, and red is actually woodland. So the data itself is a 10-meter pixel resolution. And you can see it's a little bit more granular, but also we don't end up with this sort of nice defined, this is definitely Nailsea, this is Clevedon, etc. However, we can start pulling out some more information. So you've got, you can see where the parks are within Nailsea, and this black area is sort of industrial land cover. So in some respects, you would argue that that gives you more information. However, that costs a lot of money to get your hands on the actual data. So what we've got so far is a fairly broad brush land cover and a fairly expensive land cover. If we go into Overture, one of the layers that you can get your hands on is a polygon layer, and that includes land cover. It's global. It's taken from the European Space Agency's World Cover dataset, and they've done the vectorization for you, and they've put it into the Overture dataset. So what we have here, we're back to red being areas of built up land cover. And you can see, again, it's got these issues where it's breaking them up a little bit. The data only exists for 2020 and 2021, but it's an ongoing ESA project, so that should be updated again fairly soon. And again, we're looking at 10-meter pixels that have been generalized down into vectors. So you can see we've got this dark green, which is the woodland areas, and we've got the red, which is built up, and then green is sort of grassland. So it's not perfect, but I would argue the speed at which you can get an open data set for the whole of the world, even though it's only has the 11 thematic classes, this is a definite game changer in terms of the type of information that you want and the speed at which you can access them. So the next thing we were interested in was looking at roads and pathways. And specifically for me, I was just interested in understanding the difference between the different data sets that I tend to look at. So this is, let me get it right, junction 19 on the M5. So Portishead is just up there, Bristol is just over here. I generally go to OS Open Map Local, and when I was putting together these slides, my sort of point of reference was if I just dump the data into QGIS and then theme it, what does it tell me? So I dumped the data in, I did a very quick theme, and it's told me, okay, I've got some A roads, that's in red, I've got the motorway, that's in blue. However, the motorway seems to have a single line defining it, and I've got some other roads in grey, and then service roads in green. So that's great. Yeah, probably would be useful, probably would be serviceable for most of the projects I need. So I thought then, okay, let's have a look in OpenStreetMap. And again, I'm not a big user of OpenStreetMap, so my sort of go-to was, can I just dump it into QGIS and see what it says? I dumped it in, lots of lines, that's great, they all seem to be in the right place. I tried to classify it, I literally had no idea what the hell I was doing. There were different columns, there were different things. I could not classify that in my sort of, I just want to do it in 2 minutes and not care about it. However, it is much better in terms of it's got two lanes for the motorway, seems to cover more of the service roads and things like that. Overture, I dumped in, I literally did, I don't know, 30 seconds of pointing and clicking, coloring up some stuff. It's absolutely brilliant. I love this. So I've got all the information I need about where the motorways are. I've got all the information I need about my A roads, my side roads. I've even got paths on this one. Super easy. All the data's there. It's clean. It lines up with everything else. I was really impressed with how easy that is. So if I wanted to then go and do some analytics, I can do that really easily. And then the reason we're here really is buildings. So where are we? We're about here, and this is an area, this is the River Avon. This is an area, the south bank of the Avon in Bristol. I chose this just because it's got lots of different types of buildings in it. So OS Open Map Local, again, my usual go-to. And to be honest, probably for most of the work I do, probably be fine. What you can see is large polygons, including for these areas where you have lots of terraced housing. And to be fair to OS Open Map Local, that's what it says it does. So I'm not going to say, oh, it's not got good enough fidelity in terms of the polygons and things like that. That is exactly what I was expecting. However, when you're trying to map individual buildings, it's really helpful to have more information. So these green dots here, what I'm looking at is UPRN. So it's an individual reference for each address, pretty much. And what you can see is that there's lots and lots of addresses in these areas where you've got terraced houses. So I thought, okay, how can I try and improve on the data, polygon data that I have? OpenStreetMap, again, seems like a good way forward. And again, it does pretty much what I was expecting. Polygons are much better in that they're broken up. But again, trying to get any information out of the base table would require time and effort. And for the purposes of this, I wasn't really trying to put any time and effort into it. However, Overture, again, 30-second job, you've got the same polygons all cleaned up, and then this is all classified on a single column in a table, different types. So I think it's based on whether or not it's residential, which is coming out in purple, or commercial, which is in blue, and then there's various other different types as well. So public buildings, schools, churches, all of that. Again, it's really easy to just throw up into QGIS and start basically doing your analytics straight away and understanding what you're doing with. And this is just an overview to show how each of those UPRN points now falls within a polygon. So we can start matching things to UPRN. So for instance, like EPC data, which tells you about energy usage, and you can have that for an individual building. So some things that I would say is Overture was, it is a little bit tricky to get the data. You need to sort of have a bit of a poke around their website and get it, although I'm sure Matt will tell me that it's a lot easier than I think. It is supported by modern tools. So if you've heard of DuckDB, then it interacts really well with DuckDB. I need to sit down and work out how I can use DuckDB in a more enlightened way. There is still some need for some spatial improvements in parts. So although most of what I showed you in terms of its polygons and its lines all look perfectly fine, if you start looking at a wider area, there are bits where they still need to sort of improve the breakdown of some of the information that they've got in there, but they're working on it all the time. I think there's monthly releases of new data. But it is super easy to visualize. It's ever improving in terms of its coverage. And all the major themes that you can think of are pretty much in there. And they're the key ones that you're going to be using, I would have thought. So should you use it? I will probably replace all of my very meager amounts of vector processing with this as a first go-to, because it seems to have everything in one data set that I would possibly need. So certainly, I would say you should look at it. I do need to look in a bit more depth at how they process some of that and how they get data in there. Because I just want to make sure that I'm not sort of blithely saying, use it, it's brilliant, without actually knowing where the data's come from. But I seriously recommend that you have a look at it. I think it's a game changer of a data set, and hopefully Matt will convince you as well later on. So, if you need me to do more talks or some work for you, you can contact me here. I'm also on Mastodon and LinkedIn. But yeah, if you want to talk to me about GeoMob as well, that's fine. Cool, thank you.
Very much. So, any questions before we take a bit of coffee break? I'll have one to start with. Can you clarify under which license this data comes?
No.
Okay, we'll have a look then.
I don't even want, actually.
Yeah. GPM? Very interesting. Okay. Right.
Yeah, really interesting comparison. My question really is whether you've got any idea of how this would look if you were doing it somewhere other than the UK. Where other places I've looked, particularly things like land cover, are not great, and I guess it's because of the large reliance on street map, but maybe other factors are played too.
Yeah, I think it depends on how cleaned up things are. So with that data set from ESA, it should be fairly uniform in terms of its coverage across the world. I know that in terms of buildings, I think some of the buildings in sort of the mid latitudes have come from basically AI looking through satellite data. So there's a lot in there. I'm not going to say it's super brilliant in terms of quality because I haven't looked at it to check. but everything that's on the UK side was pretty amazing. The next thing I need to do is go and look at Europe once we get some funding for the continuation of this project.
Thanks. One question I'd like you to say a little bit more on is how did you get the data? So can you say a little bit about how you actually got it?
Yeah, so initially, there's a Python tool that's been developed by the Overture developers, and that was the easiest way of getting it. So I installed that, and you can download a relatively small area, I think, of the data. However, because we were looking in our project, we were effectively going to be going local authority area by local authority area around the UK. You can create a script in Python that attaches a DuckDB spatial query, and that was the way that I did it. So it goes off and it looks through all the GeoPark files online, and then just pulls down the information you want as defined in that spatial query, which is wrapped up in Python. So that was, yeah, that's how I went about it.